And you really think we can do this?
We're going to do it.
Hi guys, and welcome back, and starting a new project, another Steve Mottram group build. This is the Gulf War group build, and the vehicle that I'm doing as the centerpiece for that build is the ASLAV, I guess that's how you say it, the ASLAV PC Phase 3, which is a vehicle that the Aussies used over there, so it'll be an Aussie vehicle as per the box art, and you can see the different bits and pieces. It's a Trumpeter kit, 05535 in 1/35th scale, and as you can see there's sort of box art on the side, and it looks pretty much like a model kit box. So my first Trumpy kit, and very excited to get stuck into it, and looking forward to building a diorama that doesn't have any buildings in it, so a lot easier just to make the kit. So we'll have a look inside, and the first thing that struck me was how well it was packed. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, lots of little pieces by the looks of things, 5, 6, 7, and 7 sprues and some rubber wheels, or rubber tyres I should say. And this looks extra well packed with some foam protection around some part of it there, so keen to have a look and see what's under there, but very, very thoughtful of them to do that. The decals, now I've bought some aftermarket decals as well, but we'll have a look at those. A bit of photo etch, there's actually 2 bits here, there's one on the other side. And then we've got the upper hull, which again looks quite nice, and we'll have a look at all these in detail in a sec. The lower hull, which is sort of a bathtub hull without the back, I guess. And a couple of clear parts, sprues, the vision ports, and also a smaller machine gun and its bits and bobs. So it all looks very nice, well put together. Bit of advertising material there, so this is very outdated, February 2014. Trumpeter's new item, so that's a few years ago, so we can get rid of that. The colour callouts and paint marking guide, which looks quite nice, and we'll have a look in more detail about the paints that they cover there, and then the instructions, which is a booklet. I must admit I prefer the booklets. I find them just easier to manage, which sounds like a first world problem instead of a folder, but anyway. That's what it looks like straight out of the box. So we'll have a look at the plastic next. But just before we do have a look at the plastic, I thought I might introduce a new little element to the brief kit sort of reviews I do before I start doing the actual build. And that's the process that we use here in Haledonia when stuff's coming into the country, and we make sure that we all of the imports quality. So the Customs and Excise Division of Haledonia will give everything a score. So the box art and how well it's packed, the mouldings and the details, decals and PE, the quality of the instructions, the overall build and fit to come up with a total score. You'll see right now that the score for the box art was a 5. So we'll have a look at the plastic now, and look, across the board I thought it was really good. I like the quality of the mouldings. I like the extra packaging and the protection that was given to some of the really fine, the filigree parts here. They were very delicate, and look, I did break a couple of them in the manufacturing. 2 sets of that sprue, which had the water cans and some of the accessories and hooks and what have you. But yeah, now this will sound really funny, but it felt like it was good plastic. To me, it felt like Tamiya plastic. It was clean, and it was almost completely devoid of any flash. And I thought the sprue gates were in sensible positions. Not sure about the rubber tyres. We'll give them a go and see how that pans out. The tread pattern looks nice, so it may be that they'll be okay. Bit of a close-up on the secondary machine gun. The glass parts, not a lot of them, but again, reasonably clear. The PE, which was quite good, and I'm getting more used to the PE in the kits these days. So a couple of little hints as we get further in about how I do some of the simpler bits. The decals, which look nice, they don't look too thick. I've got the aftermarket ones as well, so we'll see. And so for the moulding, I came up with a score of 7. So we'll have a look at the paperwork next, and initially the colour call-out. So we've got Mr. Hobby, Vallejo, Model Master, Tamiya, and Humbrol, and also the colour name and colour swatch, I guess, down the left-hand side. So that makes it pretty easy, and that looks pretty comprehensive to me. So the instructions are really good. They're in a booklet form. Not too many parts in each one of the sections. Diagrams are clear and across the board follows a logical pattern. You won't necessarily want to build it in the order that they have described it, and that's fine. And more as I get back into the hobby and get a little bit more current experience, I'm realizing that all of the small parts, I just want to leave them off altogether until I've absolutely got everything else done, because I'm just ham-fisted. So the number of times I smack the mirrors off, or broken aerial, or the very filigree delicate parts around the headlamp protectors. So the next build I do, I don't think I'll be putting any of those parts on until right at the very end. The instructions are good, but there were a couple of fundamental errors with them, just wrong part numbers or omitting a section at all. I'll highlight those without having a rant about it, because if you're going to build this kit, it might save you a bit of anguish, because it caused me to stop for a little while on some occasions to try and figure out what was going on. So the instructions, they get a 6. So on with the build, and the very first thing they want you to do is to drill a few holes. And I must admit, my heart sunk at that moment in time, because I thought, oh no, don't tell me this is a dragon kit in disguise and I'm going to have to turn a kit that is something else into this kit. That's not the case. It's actually the only time it happens, but it's the first time I've ever built a trumpeter kit, and the first step in that was try and turn it into something else. I thought, oh no, we're in trouble here, but in actual fact, it was no big deal, and it was the only time that had to happen. So we'll just push on now, and a little bit of music, and I'll pop back in occasionally if I need to explain something, like that broken piece of the axle there, which a little bit of super glue fixed. It all went together pretty nicely. So a bit of a problem here, if you can see. It was very delicate, but that's not any fault of the manufacturers. That's just me being an absolute knob. And without thinking, just saw a lump at the end of the part and thought I'd best chop that off. But it was the bend in the part that joined it up to the other part of the wire, or the frame. So not ideal, but again, so I think one of the things I really like about modelling is there's pretty much nothing you can't fix if you're willing to have a crack at it. So a little bit of thin wire bent into shape. Is it perfect? Does it replicate the exact angles of what was there? No, probably not. Would it do that in the field if it's got bumped and knocked around a little bit? Probably not. So worked for me as a solution. So I thought we might have a quick look at how I do the photo etch. And to start with, I like to have it on a really hard, solid surface, so not the Tamiya cutting mat. And I just use a wall tile. And it's the one I use for rolling out milliput or the epoxy putty. And what I like to do is bring the blade down, like drag it along the edge of the connecting part to the very edge of the piece, and then cut that as cleanly as I can, because I want to minimize the amount of filing that I have to do as far as possible, because by their nature they're typically very delicate small pieces, and my big fat fingers and holding them and folding them don't necessarily work out all that well. So we might just have another look here, and I'll try and zoom in a little bit, of just dragging it down to where the part is, and then cutting, dragging it down, and then cutting. Hopefully there's not a lot of cleanup, it might just be one little stroke with the file. You'll also notice that I leave, you have to peel one side of the protective paper off, but I leave one side on. So when you're cutting the piece, it doesn't fly off into the void and get consumed by the carpet monster. And just a little tip for gluing in the clear plastic parts. Some of the more abrasive glues or super glue in particular, will cause the glass or the plastic glass part to mist or fog or discolor. But if you just use wood glue, and that's all this is just PVA glue, and I fill it up and drop the part in and then do a little bit of cleanup. When that dries, it dries absolutely clear. And look, it's not as strong a bond as a melting bond, but unless you're swinging off the glass pieces, they should stay pretty much where they intended to stay. And just another little tip, some of the tiny parts, I like to cut the fair bit of the sprue gate off, and in some cases even leave the part number there while I'm getting all the pieces ready and cleaning them up as much as I can. A, so I don't lose them. B, that gives me a little bit more to hold on to if I'm filing up until the last sprue gate. So again, just a little bit easier if you're a little bit clumsy. So this was just the first of just a couple of little minor labelling things. So it says to use PE B23 on the back of what is the side mirror, but there is no such thing as PE B23. It's A23. It's not a big deal, but if it saves anyone a couple of minutes of wondering what they're looking for, it serves its purpose by raising it. So another minor omission in the instructions, there's a hole that needs to be drilled here, and it's marked if you're looking from the underneath. When you try and fit the part on the surface, there's no obvious hole. Again, not a big deal, but just something to be aware of. And just a trap for young players here. So I put these on, and they were a little bit fiddly to get the configurations right of the 4x4. Partly that was because the instructions were a little bit vague about what they were gluing onto, and partly I was just being a little bit thick in getting it right. The issue that confronted me though was after I'd stuck them on. I think the orders are around the wrong way, because after I had stuck these on, and a few steps further down the track, you then have to put on the frame. The frame wouldn't fit in the right spots because my earlier gluing was perhaps a little bit off target, so I had to take them off, put the frame on, and then put them back on again. So no big deal, but I think logically the frame should go on first, and then you can fit them in with the constraints of the frame already there. Live and learn. So I had to do just a little bit of experimenting with the figure to make sure it would fit in, and just had to carve a little bit off. So it was really just to get the torso in there to make sure it would fit, and then a little bit later on I'll deal with the arms so that the hands are grabbing the gun properly. And over the course of actually building this model, I inherited a notice board, which I haven't quite stuck up on the wall yet. It's just leaning there. But very handy. I've got my instructions pinned there, and later on you'll see I've got my reference photos pinned there for some other parts of the build. And really, really useful, and I think it was a reasonably inexpensive item. So I wanted to display the vehicle in the diorama with the back hatch down, and therefore I had a bit of a problem because there's no interior with this kit, and in fact I couldn't find an aftermarket interior for this kit either. So I've had a crack at some scratch building, and it is not an attempt to make a perfect replica of a ASLAV interior. It is a representation of a number of different ASLAV pictures that I've seen that will hopefully, once it's all painted and weathered up, and a little bit that you will see from the angle of the dio, it just doesn't look empty and stark. That's the main intent. So I've pretty much used everything I could lay my hands on to come up with an interior looking reasonably close to the pictures. So we'll see how that all comes out when it's finished and painted. Now, this stuff is really interesting. My daughter gave it to me. It came from some of her jewelry, I think, earrings or something like that. And it's not coming up very well now, but it will come up better later on in the painting video, because it's got a leather-like pattern in it. It's reasonably subtle. So I've used that to cover the seats, and I think it comes up really nicely. So when I'm doing stuff like this and I'm using the two-part epoxy clay to sculpt, if you're putting it onto plastic or wood or any other surface really, it's often very difficult for it to grip. So I just put a dab of super glue on it and stick it down, and it still allows you to sculpt it and move it around, but it doesn't go flying off, which makes life a hell of a lot easier when you're doing it all. So that's pretty much it from the building perspective, and we'll just do a bit of a whiz around now, and that's the configuration, fundamentally how it'll look. Of course, it'll have its tyres on when it's on the diorama with the rear gate open. So all in all, really happy with the build. Most of the parts fit very nicely together. The interior, which we'll have a better look at a little bit further on, came up well enough. I'm happy with it. I think it'll look good with a bit of stowage in there and a couple of figures loitering around. You won't see all that much of it anyway, but I think I got enough detail in there, and I think it's a reasonable approximation of some of the pictures that I showed a little bit earlier as far as what the interior looks like. So something I haven't had to do before and found it quite enjoyable. I probably spent as much time building the interior as I did building the rest of the kit in its entirety, but it was enjoyable and good use of the spare parts box. Found just lots of bits. So there's some Panzer III and there's some Sherman tank in there, and there's a little bit of J Panther in there. So there's all sorts of bits and bobs that I've managed to harvest to give an approximation of the interior. So with that, we'll give the score and we'll move on to what is almost the very end. So for the decals and the PE and the build and fit, I've given a 6 and a 7 respectively, reserving the right to come back and change the decals PE one because I haven't actually applied the decals yet. That'll happen at the end of the painting, which will be the next video, or perhaps one after if I do the figures next. I'm keen to have a crack at some of those resin figures. They look really good. But that is the score at this point in time, which gives it a total score of 31, which is about a 62% pass rate. So you might have gathered I'm a reasonably hard marker because I did enjoy it. It was a great kit to build. It was easy to build, a few little fiddly bits, but there was enough in a couple of the areas there. And look, the box art's always going to score low because it doesn't do much for me anyway. The box art's sort of like the promise, I reckon. Have they delivered on their promise? Does it look like what they say it will look like? And Yeah, mostly it does, and I think 5's about the middle of the road. It's a pass, but it wasn't brilliant. It was no Picasso. Anyway, as per usual, we'll just finish off with the priming and doing a bit of pre-shading, and that's it, guys. And I'll come back and say goodbye. So that's it, guys. Primed, a little bit of pre-shading, so quite dark under the wheels and in that area there at the base, and also the interior at the front. Not that you'll see much through the gunner when he's in there, but just in case. And then the inside, the rear interior, came back with some off-white to prime that. So all the pre-shading's done. Hit the surface. I don't think I get a good shot of it. I hit the surface of the top with some pre-shading as well. Just used a little of the off-white, lightly misted across the top. But yeah, it doesn't come up terribly well here at this time, but hopefully that will look a little bit better as we go along. So look, that's about it. There's only another few seconds worth of spinning around on the twirly-whirly, as Switcher would say. Just want to thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, great kit to make. Really looking forward to getting stuck into the rest of it. Tough score, 62%, but you got to set a baseline somewhere. So thanks for watching. Like if you like, guys. Sub if you're that way inclined, and really look forward to reading your comments. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Bye.